Hello, everyone. I'm KLGR Farm Director Scott Colon with you on your weekly Ag Roundup here on KLGR. Here are the top stories that we kept an eye on throughout the week. First off, the February UN Food Ag Organization Food Price Index averaged a reading of 131.2 points in January, down 1.1 points, or 0.8% on December, marking the 10th consecutive monthly decline. And with the latest decline, the index has fallen 28.6 points, or just under 18% from its peak back in March. The cereal price index averaged a reading of 147.4 points in January, up fractionally on the month and 6.7 points higher than its level a year ago. The vegetable oil price index averaged a reading of 140.4 points, down 2.9% month over month and nearly 25% lower than its level a year ago. Meanwhile, the dairy price index averaged a reading of 136.2 points, down 1.4% on the month, hitting its lowest level in a year. The decline in January reflected lower international prices for butter and milk powders. The meat price index averaged a reading of 113.6 points, down marginally on the month, continuing its decline for the seventh consecutive month, but it still did stand 1.3% higher than a year ago. And finally, the sugar price index averaged a reading of 115.8 points, down 1.1% on December. Back on Monday, the Minnesota Senate reconfirmed Tom Peterson as Commissioner of Agriculture. The vote was 63-0, then marks the second term for Peterson, who was first appointed back in 2019 by Governor Tim Walz to serve as a commissioner. Governor Walz, in a release after the vote, stated, quote, "Tom Peterson understands how people policy directly affects farmers' daily lives. I look forward to continuing our work to support our farmers, from new farmers to the leaders of food and ag companies, while ensuring Minnesota remains a global leader in food and agriculture." End quote. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan stated, quote, "From supporting emerging farmers to helping communities recover from drought, I'm proud to work alongside Commissioner Peterson to listen to our farmers and invest in the future of agriculture right here in Minnesota. It has been an," end quote. While Peterson stated, quote, "It has been an honor to serve as commissioner these past 4 years. I look forward to continuing to work alongside Governor Walz, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, and all the dedicated department employees to strengthen and improve our ag economy. Agriculture drives and shapes Minnesota, and I am proud to represent our farmers, producers, and food makers in the 4 years to come." End quote. Also, a group of senators this week is urging the Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service to take swift action to address the ongoing avian influenza outbreak. Lawmakers asked Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack to quickly use funds provided by Congress in the fiscal year 2023 Agriculture Appropriations Bill, led by Wisconsin Democrat Tammy Baldwin. Lawmakers stated, quote, "It is imperative the agency quickly deploy additional resources and work with the states in improving biosecurity measures within the avian supply chain, including the disinfection of sites and testing and quarantining of affected flocks," end quote. As of the end of January, Avis had confirmed avian flu in over 740 flocks in 47 states, affecting over 58 million birds, directly contributing to rising egg prices. In the fiscal year 2023 Omnibus Appropriations Act, Congress provided an increase in annual funding to address the avian influenza outbreak, including over $64 million to improve avian health, update guidance on proactively mitigating the spread of the disease. And back on February 3rd, the Southwest Minnesota State University Marshall held their annual Ag Bowl. Area FFA chapters that competed included Redwood Valley and Buffalo Hector Stewart. Here are the results. Redwood Valley took overall second place out of 51 schools, earning the chapter $300. In the team competitions, the Crops team took first place, with Lauren Dozel placing second individually and earning a $250 scholarship. Adriel Johnson scored sixth place individually. The forestry team for Redwood Valley was second place overall, with Jack Frank taking first place individually and earning a $500 scholarship, while Brody Lydek placed ninth. The Fish and Wildlife team placed third, with Calvin Smith placing sixth individually. The Small Animal and Vet Science team, along with the Meats Evaluation teams, also placed. Small Animals placing third, Brianna Degana placed 5th overall. The meat's evaluation team was 14th. Milk quality team also placed 14th. Owen Linsmeyer placed 10th individually in Best Informed Greenhand. The chapter placed 8th in Conduct of Chapter Meetings. Addison Schmidt placed 1st overall for employment skills, earning a $500 scholarship, while Liliana Carter placed 8th in Prepared Public Speaking, and Piper Riggy placed 19th in Creed Speaking. Meanwhile, for Buffalo Lake Hector Stewart, they had Michaela Pettis placing 13th in the Best Informed Greenhand, while the team placed 3rd overall. They also saw Parker Wraith placing 14th individually. And for the small animal team from Buffalo Lake Hector Stewart, they placed 6th of the team. Mason Grams also placed 6th individually. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Service released its February farm income forecast on Tuesday. Net farm income, which is considered a broad measure of profits, is forecasted at $136.9 billion in the coming calendar year, down $25.9 billion, or almost 16% relative to last year. After adjusting for inflation, net farm income is forecasted to decrease $30.5 billion, or around 18.2% this year. That's despite expected declines, with farm net income still being 26.6% above its 20-year average of $108.1 billion, while net cash farm income is forecasted at $150.6 billion this year, down $39.4 billion relative to 2022. One of the major contributing factors to lower incomes this year will be lower direct government payments and higher production expenses. The average net cash farm income for farm businesses is forecasted to decrease 17.7% to around $92,400 per farm this year. On Wednesday, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released its February World Egg Supply and Demand Report with the 2022-23 marketing year corn outlook, looking for lower corn used for ethanol and larger ending stocks. The corn used for ethanol was reduced 25 million bushels, while the season average corn price was unchanged at $6.70 a bushel. Meanwhile, soybean outlooks projecting lower soybean crush and higher ending stocks, with soybean crush forecasted at 2.23 billion bushels, down 15 million on the month. That's on lower domestic soybean meal disappearances and a higher soybean meal extraction rate. The season average soybean price for the 2022-23 marketing year is forecasted at $14.30 a bushel, up a dime on the month. Meanwhile, the supply and demand outlook for wheat is largely unchanged, with minor revisions to both domestic use and ending stocks, and the season average farm price forecasted to be a dime lower at around $9 even. That's based on prices received and expectations for cash prices for the remainder of the marketing year. A new report from the USDA's Economic Research Service is suggesting that ethanol demand may decline with the rise in electric vehicles. The global demand for fuel ethanol through 2030 report suggested that the global gas demand is expected to stagnate over the next decade, leaving changes in blend rates as the main determinant in future changes in fuel ethanol demand. After seeing strong growth for several years, the U.S. ethanol-based demand for corn has plateaued over the last decade at around 5 billion bushels, or roughly 40% of U.S. corn production. Recently, demand for transportation fuels was reduced by COVID-19, and though the markets were largely recovered, moving forward, increased adoptions of hybrid or electric vehicles and continued fuel efficiency gains will decrease the domestic gas consumption, which could decrease domestic fuel ethanol demand. The impacts could result in additional unutilized U.S. ethanol production capability. The full report can be found at ers.usda.gov. Also, Senators John Tester, Chuck Grassley, and Mike Rounds have reintroduced their Meatpacking Special Investigator Act to fight consolidation and enforce the national antitrust laws. The bill would create the Office of the Special Investigator for Competition Matters within USDA. The office would be made up of a team of investigators that have subpoena power and would be responsible for targeting and preventing anti-competitive practices among large players in the meatpacking and poultry industries. According to Rounds, quote, anti-competitive behavior in the meatpacking industry hurts both consumers and producers. Unfortunately, packer concentration in the beef industry today is more consolidated than it was when the Packers and Stockyards Act was first signed into law over 100 years ago. Meanwhile, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley stated, quote, "It's time we beef up the available tools to protect farm families and folks at the meat counter," end quote. And that is a look at your ag highlights and top stories from the week. You can find farm news online at myklgr.com. I'm KLGR Farm Director Scott Colon saying thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next week.